All right, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're diving deep, as always, but into something pretty essential: heart health, and how to prevent those heart attacks. There's just a ton of information out there. So in this deep dive, our goal is like pull out those really crucial, actionable insights for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just any topic, right? This is heart health. Heart disease is still a leading cause of death around the world.
Hmm.
So understanding prevention, that's not just about, being in the know. It's about potentially living longer and healthier lives.
Exactly, exactly. So during this deep dive, we're going to take a pretty detailed look at what exactly happens during a heart attack, like what's going on in there. Then we'll break down those key risk factors, the things you can change versus the ones you can't. And then we'll move into some practical, like everyday steps you can take, through diet and lifestyle. We're also going to explore stress and sleep, those huge factors, and why seeing your doctor regularly is so important. In the end, we want to give you a clear understanding of how to really be proactive about your heart health.
Okay, so to really understand prevention, we need to understand what's happening, during a heart attack itself.
Right, right. So our sources explain that a heart attack or myocardial infarction, that happens when the blood flow to a part of your heart muscle gets blocked. And that blockage is usually caused by plaque building up in the arteries.
Yeah, and what's interesting is this plaque buildup. It's not usually like a sudden thing. It's more of a slow, gradual process that
Yeah.
happens over years, right? Imagine like rust building up in a pipe. Eventually, it blocks the flow. So, this really shows us that taking care of your heart, it's not a quick fix. It's a long-term commitment.
Absolutely, yeah. And here's a key point that really jumped out. Heart attacks. They hardly ever happen out of nowhere. There are usually underlying issues that have been developing. So there's a window there where prevention can make a huge, huge difference.
That's exactly right. That's why being proactive is so important. It's not waiting for something bad to happen. It's about making good choices along the way to, lower your risk.
Now let's talk about risk, like who's at risk. Our sources categorized the risk factors, which really showed, what we can and can't control.
Right. It's crucial to understand the difference between those non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors. The non-modifiable ones, we can't change those. Those are things like age, the sex you were assigned at birth, and family history. Now, we can't change those, but knowing about them helps us understand our baseline risk and how we need to approach the things we can change.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So then we have the modifiable risk factors, the things we can control. These include things like smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, um, obesity, not being physically active, and how we manage stress. This is where our efforts can make a real difference.
Exactly. And let's go a bit deeper into how these modifiable factors actually affect the heart. Take high blood pressure, for instance.
So, with high blood pressure, when it's constantly high, it just puts so much pressure on the walls of your arteries. Imagine like constantly overfilling a balloon, it weakens the material and it's more likely to break, right?
That's a great analogy.
Hmm.
And all that pressure, that strain, can damage the lining of the arteries. That creates these little injuries where plaque can stick and build up. It's a vicious cycle.
Wow, okay. Then there's high LDL cholesterol. That's the bad cholesterol, right?
What happens here is that LDL cholesterol can basically get into the walls of your arteries.
Hmm.
And a key part of this is oxidation. Those LDL particles get damaged, they become oxidized, and then that's when they're really likely to get stuck and cause those artery clogging plaques to form.
Got it. And then diabetes. It's not just about high blood sugar, right?
No, not at all. Diabetes can affect your whole body, including those blood vessels, even the ones that supply your heart, and it can mess with the nerves that control your heart. So managing blood sugar levels is like essential for your entire cardiovascular system.
Wow, okay. And smoking. We all know it's bad, but understanding exactly how it harms your heart is kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. The chemicals in cigarettes, they damage the lining of your blood vessels, making them more likely to get clogged. Smoking also reduces the amount of oxygen in your blood, making your heart work harder to deliver oxygen to the rest of your body. It's just putting a ton of stress on your whole cardiovascular system every time you inhale.
All right, so we have a better understanding of the risks. Now, what can we actually do to protect ourselves? Let's start with food.
Yeah, this is where things get interesting because what we eat has a huge impact on heart health. Instead of just thinking about individual good or bad foods, it's more helpful to think about an overall healthy eating pattern, like a lifestyle.
And a lot of our sources recommend the Mediterranean diet. It's a good example. What's in that exactly?
Well, the Mediterranean diet is all about fruits, veggies, and whole grains, things like quinoa, brown rice, whole wheat bread. Lots of legumes, like lentils and chickpeas and nuts and seeds. The main fat is healthy monounsaturated fat, especially olive oil. Protein usually comes from fish and poultry, and you eat those in moderation. Red meat and processed foods, you keep those to a minimum.
So based on that, what are some specific things our listeners can actually do?
Aim for at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That might sound like a lot, but it's doable. When you're choosing grains, go for the whole grain options over refined grains. Include those healthy fats. Try avocado in your salad, snack on almonds, or have some salmon a couple times a week. And really important, watch your sodium intake. Processed foods are often loaded with salt, so read those labels carefully.
That makes a lot of sense. And our sources also talked about how much we eat, not just what we eat.
Yeah, portion control is key. Even when you're eating really healthy foods, eating too much can make you gain weight. And that extra weight puts more strain on your heart.
So how about alcohol? There's just so much back and forth about it.
I hear you. Some research suggests that a little bit of alcohol, like light to moderate drinking, might be good for the heart for some people, but drinking too much can directly damage your heart muscle, so it's better to be safe and limit how much you drink.
All right, so let's move on to physical activity. We all know it's good for us, but what are the guidelines?
The American Heart Association recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity each week. Or you can do 75 minutes of vigorous activity. And you want to add muscle strengthening exercises at least twice a week.
Those numbers can sound kind of overwhelming if you're just starting out.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to remember that any movement is better than none. You don't have to jump into intense workouts right away. Start with things you enjoy and can keep doing. Brisk walking, swimming, gardening, dancing, it all counts.
So it's about finding something you like, being consistent, and gradually getting more active.
Exactly. Make it part of your routine, not a chore.
Okay, now let's talk about stress, something that can be, hard to pin down, but really affects our bodies.
What's important here is how chronic stress affects our hearts. When you're stressed for a long time, your body goes into that fight or flight mode. You release hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and those make your heart beat faster and your blood pressure goes up.
And that's fine for a short time, but it's a problem when it's constant, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're exposed to those stress hormones for too long, it can actually damage your arteries and make things like high blood pressure and high cholesterol worse. And people who are chronically stressed, they're also more likely to cope in unhealthy ways like overeating, drinking more, or smoking.
So managing stress isn't just about feeling better mentally. It directly affects our heart health. What are some good ways to manage stress?
There are some really effective techniques. Things like mindfulness meditation and deep breathing exercises can help calm your nervous system and reduce that stress response. Yoga combines movement with mental focus. Even small things like taking breaks from the news and social media, spending time in nature, or doing hobbies you enjoy can really lower stress levels.
And then there's sleep, another one that's often overlooked, but so important for our overall health, including our heart health.
Absolutely. When you sleep, your body repairs and regenerates itself, and that includes your heart and blood vessels. Not getting enough sleep has been linked to high blood pressure, obesity, and type 2 diabetes, all major risk factors for heart disease.
So skimping on sleep actually increases our risk.
That's right. Most adults need around 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep each night to be healthy.
See you soon for the
and
next
just like
part.
with diet and exercise, there are things we can do to improve our sleep, right?
Yes, good sleep hygiene is essential. That means having a regular sleep schedule, even on weekends, avoiding screens before bed, making sure your bedroom is cool, dark, and quiet, and not having caffeine or alcohol late in the day.
It's amazing how everything's connected. Okay, let's talk about regular heart health checkups with a doctor.
Yeah, that's a major part of prevention. How often you need a checkup depends on your age, any health conditions you have, and your individual risk.
What are some general guidelines everyone should know?
Most adults should get their blood pressure checked every year. Cholesterol should be checked every 4 to 6 years, starting around age 20. But if you have any risk factors for heart disease or a family history, your doctor might recommend more frequent checkups.
And it's a good idea to get a baseline measurement when you're younger, right?
Yeah, definitely. Get your blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, and BMI checked when you're in your 20s or 30s. That gives you a starting point to track any changes and catch potential problems early.
What kind of screenings can people expect at these checkups?
Usually, they'll check your blood pressure, do a lipid panel to check your cholesterol levels, a blood glucose test for diabetes, and calculate your BMI. And depending on your risk factors and symptoms, your doctor might recommend more tests, like an EKG.
Wow, we've covered a lot today. If you had to choose just one or two things our listeners could start doing today to improve their heart health, what would they be?
Hmm. If I had to pick two things, I'd say first, find ways to move more every day. Doesn't have to be a crazy workout, just a 10-minute walk can make a difference. And second, find out your key health numbers. Know your blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, and BMI. Once you know those numbers, you can understand your risk and start taking control.
Those are great starting points. And the overall message today is that improving your heart health isn't about some big overnight change. It's about being consistent, making small, manageable changes that add up over time.
That's it. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are so many good resources out there. And talking to your doctor is always a good first step to create a plan that's right for you.
So as you go about your day, think of this deep dive as a starting point for your own journey to a healthier heart.
And here's something to think about. Considering all the ways our everyday choices affect our heart health, what's one small thing you could do every day that could have a big impact on your heart in the long run? Think about that and maybe do some more research on your own.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into heart health. We hope it gave you some good information and some practical steps you can take. Until next time, be well.